Welcome to Week in Review. This is an extremely important one, and as you know, today and tomorrow represent the midterm elections. And I want to speak to you just briefly here that it is your opportunity. You can deliver the Dems their day of reckoning. You know, in the Old Testament, God warned when people deviated from his will. You know what he said? He said, you sow the wind, but you will reap the whirlwind. In other words, you'll reap what you sow. And we have watched policies and positions and propaganda that is being put forth in this nation and how it has brought ruin to our country. Now, I want to tell you this. I just returned from California. Dr. Cheon, a dear friend of mine, one of my longest and closest friends, held a roundtable summit. And Dr. An has written a book, and it's a great book. And I'd like to read something that he said, because this conveys something of what was the heartbeat of what we experienced there, and also to encourage us, because there is a day of reckoning. There is a reaping of whirlwind that is coming to a party that has gone down wrong paths. Let me read this to you from Dr. An's book. Here's what he said. He said, our world is in desperate need of revival. And in this crucial moment in time, I am convinced that revival, true historic revival, is on God's agenda. I believe you and I are being offered a divine invitation right now. God is beckoning us to recognize the amazing and powerful ways that he has moved in the past so that we can act as a bridge in the Spirit to contend for an even greater move of God in our generation. What God has done before, he will surely do again. I agree, and I believe that that is the heartbeat of God. I have a book. It's probably the oldest book that I have in my study. It was given me by Steve Hill from the Brownsville Revival, who is currently in heaven and part of a crowd of witnesses that's cheering us on. And the book was by General William Booth, and it was called In Darkest England and the Way Out. In Darkest England and the Way Out. And what it was in the late 1800s, the state, the condition of people and society, the culture in England, they needed an inbreaking of God. And so General Booth, as a pioneer, he led the way. He's the one that says, I'm not waiting for a move of God, I am a move of God. And that's what we want to be, because we want to see a turnaround in this country. Now, you're feeling the effects. And I can tell you this, in the 70s, when Richard Nixon was president and a man named Spiro Agnew was vice president, we were in a meeting 10, 15 minutes away in Washington, D.C., from just near the White House. And we began to pray for our nation because there was obvious signs of corruption and fraud and things that were going on, just like we see today. And so the 2,000 of us that met every week, we began to pray, like 1 Timothy 2 says, for our governing authorities. And we also believed in 2 Chronicles 7:14 that we had a responsibility to pray regularly and to confess humbly sin. And that would be on behalf of our nation as well as personal sin. And then also engage by voting. With the midterm elections, today, tomorrow, we've got to prioritize voting. Now, let me, if I can, just share with you, we prayed, and within, I'd say within a matter of a year or two, we saw the removal, the resignation of the vice president, and then a year later, the resignation of the president. You say, what happened? Well, we believe our prayers were answered as we were doing God's will. And you know what? That's never happened in history. Now, we're at a similar time. Because you know what? We also saw then a man that came into office. His name was Jimmy Carter. And he began to ruin our nation with his policies and with his positions and his just poor leadership. And what happened was, can you imagine this? Our inflation went to 14%. Now, 2 years ago in this country, you know what inflation was? 1.3%. And how about mortgage interest rates? You know, when you're going to buy a home or you want to get some, let's say, a loan out to start a business. Do you know when we got our home about 10 years ago, I think we paid about 2.5%. A few years ago, it was about 3%. Under Carter, it went up to 18%. Folks, this is serious. Well, People not only prayed, but we began to vote. And Mr. Carter he had a day of reckoning. He was removed, run out of office by a man named Ronald Reagan, a conservative man that said, we're going to have a Reagan revolution. And all of a sudden, we started to see a robust economy and things were turned around. There's multitudes today that are saying a day of reckoning is at hand, and we need to capitalize on that. And what we need to do is act quickly. Now, I want to tell you, just let's make it real personal. I had a car repair that was needed recently. And you know what? I was shocked because it was about double what I expected to pay. I had some printing done at a major national chain, and I normally pay $40 every month. Guess what? $55. You know what I'm talking about. Let me just read to you. I just jotted down a few things. Bank of America, they just released a report, and they said, where are we at today? State of America. Listen to this. 7 in 10 Americans are looking for extra work to offset the high cost of living and high prices. How about this one? 71% of people say their salaries are not enough to keep up in this hour. The average grocery bill listen to this, has gone up 66% in the past year, according to Bank of America. How about this one? Energy costs have gone up 100% in over 1 year. And how about the average U.S. family is now going to pay, are you ready? In 1 year, almost $7,000 more. You say, Larry, I like good news. Well, the good news is it's time for a change. In Darkest England, The Way Out. That was the book that General Booth did to encourage people. He had a strategy. We need a strategy. But let's be honest. You know what? We have been deceived in many ways. There have been falsehoods. There have been narratives put forth. You know what I'm talking about. When a man came into office, he said he was going to unify the country. I'm sorry, we've never seen such division as we see right now. How about this? The border is secure. And all of a sudden we begin to see, wait a minute, there's an invasion. 5 million people coming across. We're told, the rich have to pay their fare, and you're not going to have tax increases with me. Well, what have we seen? We've seen inflation that is 40-year high. We've seen gas prices. Come on, you pull in that gas station, you're paying double for gas. All of a sudden we were told, vax, you get these mandates, get these boosters, and you won't have a problem. And it's time for Fauci to tell us, and it's time for lockdowns and closing schools. The studies have come out, and we see the absolute failure of what was put forth. And I believe Mr. Fauci was completely untrustworthy in what was said. And how about school lockdowns? The data that has come out on this. You say, well, what about other things? Well, how about the Russian collusion? You remember that one? 3 years, tens of millions of dollars. The whole thing was bogus. It was a hoax. These things were put forth. Green New Deal. We need to spend $1 trillion. Infrastructure. And that became the crisis rationale for spending the money. And then the value of the dollar dropped. And we've seen shortages. We've seen skyrocketing prices. How about crime in cities? Because of the open border that they were telling, oh, it's secure. There's no crisis. There's no inflation. There's no recession. We have seen a narrative put forth, and now we're seeing this is the day of reckoning for the Dems. They have sown the wind, and they are reaping the whirlwind. Skyrocketing crime in cities. We see 100,000 people have died of fentanyl. Where does that come from? That's come right across the border there because people are just walking in. I could go on and on. Let's be encouraged. Where evil does abound, so much more does grace abound. And even as God broke in a first and second great awakening in America, and we saw in England, and we've seen in other countries of the world, supernatural intervention, that's what I believe God is providing us. Let's step back, let's pray, and remember, on Monday and on Tuesday, no matter what, midterm elections, go and vote. Vote for traditional conservatives, and let's see a day of reckoning to those that have brought such damage to our country. It's a new day. It's a new day for America, and let's cooperate and watch this day of reckoning unfold.